Hello and welcome to the 21st Century Work-Life podcast, where we talk about leading remote teams, online collaboration, and working in distributed organizations. This podcast is brought to you by Virtual Not Distant, where we help managers and teams transition to an office-optional approach. Find out everything we do over at virtualnotdistant.com and check out our show notes and pictures of our lovely guests over on the podcast page. It's great to have you here, listeners. Let's get on with the show. Hello and welcome to episode 301 of the 21st Century Work-Life podcast after the hangover of episode 300 where I just went overboard. But if you have listened to any of the three parts that episode consists of, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. Today we are back to a guest episode, and actually I recorded this interview back in February 2022, but of course it's still relevant, and this is going to be relevant for a very long while. And what I'm hoping is that, maybe 5 years' time, it won't be relevant at all. And the reason why I'm hoping that, it's because it's talking about introducing asynchronous communication as a concept, but also video asynchronous video even. So that's why I'm thinking, well, hopefully it won't take too long, because we know that asynchronous communication is just something that anyone working in a remote way, and that includes hybrid, will need to embrace it. So I talked with Brian Casel. He is the creator of Zip Message, and we have a good chat about asynchronous in general and also using video in this way and how he uses it. It's a great episode. I really enjoyed it. I got a lot out of it. And it's something also that I think, from hearing guests talk about what they would like to see in the 21st century work life, it makes perfect sense. Asynchronous communication, as I say, a lot of us are working on that. At Virtual Not Distant, we're working on a self-paced course. I know Workplaceless also have some training in that area. So if you look around, you're going to find people who have embraced this form of medium for a while, understand it, and can help you to embrace it. So there we go. Oh, if we haven't met before, my name is Pilar. I'm the director of Virtual Not Distant, and you can find out everything about us over at virtualnotdistant.com. 1 second before I move on to the conversation with Brian, because, well, in the next episode, 302, it's a What's Going On episode. So myself and Maya will reflect a little bit on this 300th episode part. But before that, I just want to send a big shout out to my friend Zara, because she is a professor at the Aga Khan University in Pakistan. She was actually my roommate. We shared a room, and we also shared a flat. She's great friend. I have so much respect for her. And the fact that she mentioned that she commented on my post on LinkedIn and said that your work is so topical and globally relevant, it made my day. Because I'm always so concerned that we are so UK-centric, US-centric. We go a little bit into Spain because of Maya's and mine connections. We go a little bit into other places where our guests are living, but we do have a small bubble. And so if every now and then somebody who's outside of that bubble says, hey, I'm also here, I'm listening, it's also relevant to me, I am delighted about that. So there'll be more thanks and more mentions in the next episode. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Brian, because I certainly did. Hello, Brian. It is wonderful to meet you, but you're going to have to tell me how to pronounce your surname, because I forgot to ask you before we started.
Oh, that's great. Well, yeah, thank you, Pilar, for having me on. It's Casel.
Brian Casel. Excellent.
Yeah, everybody in my life says Casel, but it's Casel. So.
Great. You see, it's always great to allow the guests to say their names, and then I don't mess up. Or if I mess up, at least listeners have heard you. Well, it is lovely to have you here. And listeners, Brian is the founder and creator of Zip Message, which is a tool for async video messaging. And, well, listeners, we know that we are great advocates at Virtual Not Distance of asynchronous communication to make remote work sustainable. But before we get into all of that, Brian, how did you end up in the online space, remote space? What's your history with the medium?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've basically been, living here online and working remotely for most of my professional career here. I've been self-employed for 13 years, and I think in all that entire time I've worked remotely. So, working remotely with people all across the world is not very new to me. When the pandemic came, it was sort of like business as usual, at least in terms of my work.
Mm.
My family is another story with my kids and everything with
Yes.
schools and stuff. But like, that's where I come from. So my background originally is as a designer and web developer. Creating and designing websites. That's how I started my career. I actually started at an in-house web agency in New York City, and then I went freelance like 13 years ago. And then since then, I've sort of just been building multiple businesses, starting from web design focused businesses, and then into some software and also some client agency type of stuff like content marketing agencies. And I sold a bunch of my businesses over the last several years, and some actually pretty recently. And then fast forward to today, I'm basically just focused on running Zip Message, which is a software tool, as you said, for video messaging, asynchronous. It's very conversational, so it's sort of designed to be able to send somebody a message and then get one right back from them. And they could be a customer or a client or someone else that you're working with. They don't need to download or install any software or anything. So that's the whole idea there.
Excellent. We'll get into how it works afterwards, because I'm always interested as well into some of the choices you might have made. So does this mean, well, you've been in the space for a very long time. Has video been something that you've always warmed up to, or yeah, what's your own personal
Yeah.
preference, and how has that developed with tech also developing?
In terms of using video for messages, like internally, sending a message or some feedback to someone, that's a little bit more recent. I would say in the last 2 or 3 years. There's other tools out there, like a popular one is Loom, and I was using that, which sort of led me toward Zip Message because it solves a few of the gaps that I saw with Loom, but we can get into that later. But
Mhm.
I have always been async though in other forms of asynchronous. So a lot of email, Slack, and using project management tools with my team. Using comments to communicate without having to resort to having lots of live calls or live, Zoom calls or meetings. I'll have occasional meetings with people, but I've always felt so much more productive um, in asynchronous forms of communication. And we can get into that. I've been sort of obsessed with async my whole career, but I think video does add another element to it. I think there's some things that are perfectly fine to send over an email or a text message, um, but there's just a lot more that you can communicate when you're on video. You can emphasize certain things. You can show your work and things like that. So.
Mhm. And sorry to bring you back a little bit in history, but were you an early adopter of video in meetings, or were you one of the people who resisted? Because it's different.
I'm trying to think because I've had all different types of meetings over the years. I mean, there's like direct meetings with people that I'm working with. I've
Yes.
done a lot of podcasting over the years.
Uh-huh.
So that's sort of not new to me. Yeah, I mean, I think like when Zoom started getting popular, before the pandemic,
Mhm.
I had been using Zoom for video calls for at least a couple of years. I think this practice of being able to like record a video and then send it to someone, that's
Mhm.
still a relatively new thing. Just in the last couple of years, it's becoming more popular where, hey, I want to send a message to somebody that I'm working with and they live all the way in Australia. We can't really make the time zones work, but I also want to show them something on my screen. So let me record a 5-minute video message. That's becoming more common, although it's still, people are getting used to it. But yeah, I've been doing that for a few years and it's worked really well.
So if we're talking about asynchronous communication, which for those new to the medium just means that there's a time lag between me sending you the message and you expecting to reply.
Mhm.
um, you already mentioned one example of using asynchronous video. When did you start to feel like, okay, email's not working, or putting a message in my project management tool's not working, I need to hop onto this tool that, Loom was already there. You were already using it. What are the kind of situations when you found yourself grabbing, say, okay, right, I need to go on video to record the message?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if you think about it, like all the cases where you might otherwise say to somebody, "Hey, can we hop on a quick Zoom call to talk about this?" Or, "Hey, can we have a team meeting to discuss this project or these plans?" A lot of those situations, I would not, I personally would not want to do too many calls and meetings, and I know that my teammates don't necessarily like that either. And I've always found it much more productive to say, "Hey, we can get the same sort of fidelity and communication of face-to-face communication without having to be on a live call." And I mean, that's ultimately what led me really into Zip Message. But what I have always really liked about it is I can prepare the message that I want to send to someone. I can say, "Okay, we've got this thing. I want to communicate some key objectives here, or I want to communicate some detailed feedback. Let me gather my thoughts. Let me take some notes, and then record a quick 2-minute video or a 5-minute video. Maybe I'm showing something on the screen, or I'm just speaking to the camera, um, and then I can actually take some time to, you know what, I can tighten that up. Maybe I need to re-record, and I can say it a little bit better and get my point across a little bit more clearly." With async, I have space to do that. So then I can send it to my team, and then they can do the same. They can receive it. They can think about it. They can go out and take a walk and think it over and gather their thoughts. And then they're coming back to me with their best possible idea. Because I think that all those situations where we would otherwise hop on a live call or jump into a meeting, it's not just the convenient, it's not just the fact that, yes, you're taking up people's time during their day or on their calendar to have that meeting. It's also like the work of being on, being turned on, you're basically on the spot. You're in a meeting. If somebody asks a question, you have to respond right now with your best answer, your best idea. And with async, I found that both me and the people I work with, having that space to receive it and think about it and then prepare our best idea to come back to them, it actually just results in a better outcome for everyone. Plus we get our time back and we can actually do our work and things.
You're making me think of all the different layers that there are to this, which is, so there's two ways in which I'm seeing people adopt asynchronous communication. One is to solve that problem of there are too many meetings. So going back to that thing, till we meet. And the other way is just that it's a part of the communication, and it's something that just integrates and flows in. And so if we're looking at the first instance, when we're thinking, well, rather, okay, I want to call this meeting. Why do I want to call this meeting? Do I want to call this meeting because I want to offload an idea onto you? Because that's sometimes what's happening. I think that is the best way we think we're doing that, rather than I want to hear what you've got to say, or I want to bounce off you. Sometimes we just want to talk to someone to, like you say, to communicate something. And I think in that case, even that first call, okay, is this something? Just stop before I say that. Okay, what I want to do is actually communicate this, and then let it sink for a while. And also, I think really being very very disciplined in really when do we need that response, because as you say, it's something that actually we want to communicate and discuss, but it's not urgent, or we don't need it to happen now. Then is there a way of giving everyone space? So yeah, good example.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that, traditionally a lot of office environments and companies, they have this thing like if we can hop on a meeting right now, then it's going to get done faster. It's going to get done right now. But that's not necessarily true. Like, yes, you might be able to talk about it live right now, but whatever it is that you're working on, somebody still needs to go and do that work. And it's probably not even going to be done as well if they're sort of under the pressure of having to turn it around quickly, right? So not only just in communication, but just in the way that my businesses and services and products have operated, I've always sort of wanted to make sure that we're not really constrained by time. Obviously, we want to move quickly and meet deadlines and whatnot, but uh, having the workplace not revolve around being under the gun time wise, that helps.
Yeah, and I think that leads us to the mindset of adopting some of these alternatives to communicating with each other. Means that sometimes we need to slow down the pace, maybe not necessarily the pace of work, but the pace of communication. And we really need to understand what is the pace that we need to be communicating at, rather than what are we used to doing, which is being available all the time to each other. So there's quite a lot to think about when you start to think about how to use these tools.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I actually, in some cases, I still like a mix of live calls and asynchronous, because where I find live calls are really more helpful. Well, number one would be recording podcasts like this one. But also, like, especially when I'm working with somebody new. So if I've just hired somebody, or I'm considering hiring someone, I still want to have a live call to just meet them, just see about that personality fit, and build like a rapport with someone. I think that's where a live communication is really good. But then when it comes into actually hashing out the details of some work, and actually the hiring process is a place where I'm using Zip Message, and a lot of people are using it a lot for this. So taking inbound video messages from applicants is one part of it. Then you can have a live meet and greet with a few top candidates. But then I like to have a week or 2 weeks of asynchronous video messaging back and forth with a top candidate to talk about the role that we're planning and our goals for working together, and seeing some of their recent work. Because like a 15-minute or 20-minute interview, you can't really fully get to know somebody and their entire background and what they could actually bring to your team. But it helps to be able to hash that out over video messages back and forth over a week or two, without having to do additional interviews and follow-up interviews with multiple candidates, and again, filling up everybody's calendar. I found that's a really effective use of async.
And you use Zip Message for that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the
Which
nice
is great.
the nice thing about it is that it's designed as a threaded back and forth conversation. So it's like picture one page, and videos just sort of flow down the page as the conversation continues. Whereas these other tools, you're basically recording a message and sending it off, and it's sort of like one directional. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, but it's great that the people who are applying to work with you are getting that real experience. That's like a third of the onboarding done by the time they get to you.
Yeah. That's what I like about it, is that like you sort of get that head start with someone before you fully commit to like, okay, this is going to be a good fit long term.
So just on that then, so that this is one of, I had three use cases, if you will, of how you might be using Zip Message that I wanted to ask you about. One is within your team, other one is with clients, but the other one was for hiring as well. What's the reaction or what is the process, or what have you noticed with candidates who are coming to you and you are going through this recruiting process, and some of it involves this backwards and forwards with video, which I am imagining they haven't encountered very widely. I'm making an assumption, but please correct me. What's that like for them? Do you know? Or what are you getting that it's like from them?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a mix. I mean, there are some people who are already fairly comfortable with this way of communicating. Others, it's a new medium for them to communicate. And then it's also a question of like, well, how adaptable are they, and can they pick up this form of communication? And yeah, I mean, there are cases where they're just not comfortable, or they don't reply in a timely fashion, and I think that's a data point, right? Like if I really can't work with someone if they're going to take several days to respond to my messages, even if it's just email. I mean, that's probably not going to work for our workflow. But I think more and more people these days, especially in the industry that I'm in, which is mostly software development
Mm.
and online marketing of software products and things. I think a lot of people in my corner of the industry here, most of us have been remote and have been pretty comfortable with these tools. But still, there's definitely like a transition process happening where there are some people who they might prefer to write their responses in text, and that works fine as well. Of course, with Zip Message, we call it a video messaging tool, but actually a lot of the messages are just written back in text. We have like text, you could do audio only, you could do screen or camera. So people like to mix and match based on what's required in the message. I mean, a lot of times I just need to come back to someone with, hey, that sounds good, and I'll just type that.
Mm.
Whereas other times I want to talk about some detailed specs for a new project, and then I'll pull up a document and put my camera on the screen and show them that. Really depends.
It's really a skill, isn't it, to navigate the asynchronous space? Well, like any other space, like any other communication space. But what I'm hearing from you is that we have this bit of conscious incompetence when we start to go, okay, what do I need? Okay, what is the message? How is this best achieved? Let me grab that tool right to the moment where actually we're doing it almost, well, but it becomes second nature to know whether what I need to use is text, whether what I need to use is audio, video, etc.
You're right. Yeah, it is sort of a new skill. I haven't even really thought about that as like it's like a natural skill that people are starting to pick up. Because one thing that I've noticed is, remote work is not new. Plenty of companies were working remotely well before the pandemic, and most of my industry has been remote for many years, so it hasn't been that new. But what I am seeing is, I think companies are moving into this phase where they're trying to optimize for working remotely. Like they're not just figuring out how to work remotely, but they're saying like, well, we've been remote, but how can we communicate even better since we are a remote team or a remote company? And I think they're looking at these tools and these workflows of how they communicate, to kind of work into those routines.
And it's becoming a part of what defines the culture of an organization as well. Because just something you said, you were talking about something being timely. And again, once we start to adopt these tools, well, pretty much like we should have done with email when we first started using it, we need to define that. We need to define, well, what is timely for this organization or this team? What is timely for the other one? And really, we've got to make explicit a lot of norms of communication that we might have just picked up.
The larger the organization, the slower things tend to move. But still within small teams, even within a large organization, I think it benefits everyone to move relatively quickly in terms of response times, and that doesn't have to be respond within the hour. But if I send a message in the morning, I think getting a response before the end of the day, that still keeps us pretty productive. And it gives us plenty of space to actually do our best work throughout the day. And
Yeah.
I want to come back to one point you were asking about, people just beginning to adopt this way of communicating asynchronously. What I found is, for both teammates and clients alike, they pretty quickly start to actually see and feel the benefits, which sort of accelerates the adoption. So what I mean is, one of the other benefits here is that if you've had your conversation asynchronous, then your messages are all logged in the thread. So the other person can always go back and reference back, oh, what did we talk about? What was that detail that my client or my coworker needed from me on that one point? If that was in a meeting, I mean, think about all the times if we were in a live meeting for an hour and all the little details that were said, but then they're forgotten or they're missed. And let's say it's a new employee and they need to go and do some work that was just discussed. They might be stressing out over, what did my boss need me to take care of? I forgot what was said like 20 minutes into that meeting. Whereas if it's all asynchronous, they can just go back to the conversation and play it back or see the text that was sent, and and then they have that detail at their fingertips, makes them more confident in their work, and then ultimately they're not missing those details. They're delivering better work, and it's a better outcome for everyone. And I think that happens enough times, happens more frequently. Everyone starts to sort of get on board, like, you know what, this is actually a better way of communicating and working.
Yeah, when you start to see it right in front of you as well, quite
Yep.
literally. So you're mentioning that you use this also with your clients, and I'm really interested in this because pre-pandemic more than post, there was always this thing, yeah, it's all very well to be a remote team, but as soon as we start to communicate with the outside world, that's where it all was falling apart. Of course, it really does help that your product is an asynchronous video tool. So it makes whatever you do around communication there, whether it's onboarding people into it or working with clients, it makes sense that you're using it. But how have you found that process of supporting clients and working with clients through asynchronous video?
At the beginning, about a year ago, when I started ZipMessage, I still owned my previous company, which was a content marketing agency. And I recently sold that business just a few months ago, but I had run that for 7 years, and we had a team of 25 all remote team members, so lots of writers and content and account managers, and we would work with clients all over the world, all remotely. And we would have usually one sales call and maybe one kickoff call with a new client. My team my managers would have that call with them. But then after that, almost all the communication with clients happened asynchronously, and they would work with us for many years. So every single week for years, my team would be delivering content to a client over email. The client would come back to us with feedback, sometimes using ZipMessage with sending their thoughts back about an article that we wrote for them, or we need to do some research, like we have some questions to ask them for an upcoming article that we're writing, and we would send those questions maybe over an audio message, and then have the client respond to us asynchronous with a video or an audio response, and then our writing team can go back and turn their responses into well-written content material. And so we use those sorts of communication loops with clients, just all the time. I think clients really loved it because, again, we can really nail all those little details that they wanted in their content. And I really liked it, and for my team, because I always cared about protecting my team's time. I didn't want my teammates to have to subject them to lots and lots of calls with clients all day long. I mean, most of them are writers and creators, and I want them to feel very efficient with their time. So, and any way to reduce the amount of calls that they would need to get on while not sacrificing quality of their work. That really worked out well in that setting.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever had any pushback?
Yeah, I mean, a few times. Occasionally we had some clients who are a little bit more traditional, and they just constantly asked to have a call with our team, every week about content. And we did have to start to push back on that, because frankly, it just wasn't built into the way that we price our services and the way that we pay our team and all that. Why should one client get hours of live face-to-face time with our team while other clients get the same deliverables, but they don't need to get on calls? So that sort of self-selected the types of clients that we would work with, which in that business tended to be a lot of software companies and stuff. So they were generally pretty comfortable with that way of communicating. But yeah, I mean, again, though, we would. It's not like we would always refuse to get on calls. Occasionally we would,
Yeah.
but the more we communicated over email and video messages and things like that, again, the more they're feeling the benefit, and they're starting to see oh, this is actually a lot more efficient, and it resulted in even those clients coming around and staying with us for years. So.
Great. So it sounds to me like another thing that really helps adoption is good role modeling. It's even if we're not adopting it yet, to see and to, like you say, to start to feel the benefits, to start to see the possibilities, start to see the diversity also, because we are Well, we're becoming unstuck now from thinking that asynchronous needs to be written, and of course, written is part of async. But there's, like you say, it's adopting and having the access to technology where it's easy and fast to get onto an audio recording or a video recording that I think really starts to unlock really the potential of async.
Yeah, you're right, because exactly. I mean, async is not new. Email has
No.
been around
Letters.
forever, and
Do you
write
remember
letters.
letters?
Yeah. Wow, that's true. I mean,
Yeah.
text messaging and then even Slack, all of that has been around for many years now. But what used to happen was, you know what? When text is not enough, when writing an email is we can't get it across, that's when people would jump to a video call or a phone call, which is synchronous. But now that we have these tools for sending video messages and screen recordings and just audio, it does really unlock things.
Mhm. Nice. So we're looking at hiring with you've used it with clients as well. How are you using it within your team?
Yeah, we're using it in a number of ways. So the hiring thing is something that I do regularly, and I use it for talking and getting to know new people that I might start working with. I also use it very regularly with our customers of Zip Message.
Hmm.
It's obviously like so meta here, but like when a
Yeah.
new customer signs up for Zip Message, pretty often I will send them a Zip message to sort of welcome, like a personal, just me to them, welcoming them to the tool and asking for their feedback. And I've had a lot of really good product feedback and feature requests and things like that coming from
Nice.
our customers. So obviously they're trying out Zip Message, so they're pretty comfortable with using the tool. I am working with like a marketer on some content that we're developing for our own site, and I live here in the United States. She lives in Australia,
Mm.
so we have almost no time zone overlap whatsoever, and and we have a really great working relationship where we can send feedback on the articles she's writing and the ideas that we're sending back and forth um, over email. And then the other thing is, I spend most of my time working on the product itself. So in the code, I'm a designer and developer, and I work with a team of developers, and that's completely asynchronous, and that's really helpful for software development. It's very technical communications that we're sending back and forth. So we're hashing out details about how we're architecting the product and how how the code is being implemented. So we have to be very precise in what we're talking about, and that's where it really helps to we do use a lot of text communication there to sort of like document what we're writing, but a lot of times I will record a video to show the interface or the new design and how it needs to function, or use a video to show a bug or something that went wrong. Customers also send us their videos of hey, I tried to do this and this didn't work, and then we'll use that video to troubleshoot it.
Yeah, the screen sharing element of it is, of course, very useful for all sorts of things, actually, not just technical ones as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
didn't want to forget about that one.
Yeah, and like
Yes.
design too.
Hmm.
I do a lot of design, and I've collaborated with other freelance designers, and so it's also really great for showing like a design mock-up for, let's say, a new website design, and then talking through. Well, first to present it to a client, say, hey, like here's my next iteration of the design. Take a look at these elements. Tell me what you think, and then the client can come back and literally point to different corners of the screen and give us their feedback. Very visual.
And did I understand correctly, Brian, that so can I do text and audio in a zip message as well as video?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a one platform.
Yeah, it's a very simple interface. So you can when you pull it up, you see a little recording interface, and you can choose, I want to turn my screen on and or my camera and my microphone, or just write text.
Hmm.
And you can toggle on and off any of those in every message. And then as you send your message and then receive one back, you'll see each message down the page, and some of those might be video, some of them might be text, some of them might just be an audio player, and you can also upload attachments and files to it as well.
And is it only one-to-one or is it one-to-many as well?
Yeah, it can be one-to-many. That's pretty common. The nice thing about zip messages, and the whole idea from the very beginning, was I just want to create a link and I want to share that link with whoever I want. And then they can all just hop right into this conversation and we can all post messages to each other. And so when I send a conversation link to someone, it might just be me to you. It might be 4 or 5 of us in a group, or I might tweet a zip message link out and my whole audience can submit their responses, sort of like a community, like ask me anything sort of thing. We actually have quite a few podcasters who use it as like their intake form from listeners.
Oh, wonderful. I wonder if the audience of 21st Century Work Life would zip anything back. I only find out that they've been listening to the show like years after when they come onto the show as a guest. They've been listening.
I see that with my podcast too. It's like people have been listening and I haven't heard from them forever.
Yes.
But the other thing that sort of makes it unique is it's not just a tool for me to record my message and send it to you. It's also a tool for me to offer an intake page, right? And we give you a personalized URL, right? So mine, like literally anyone listening to this can send me a message by going to zipmessage.com/Brian. And you can reserve your own brand name or your personal name. And that's a page that just like you could share a calendar booking link, you can share your async page and they can send a message to you and then that'll start a new conversation. So again, it makes it really easy to be able to share it with a client or a customer and they don't have to download or install or even sign up for anything. They can just go to your page and now you're in an async conversation with someone.
It makes complete sense, as you said, that you were freelance in the online space, looking after clients and customers and diverse kind of work, and that you've landed with this because it sounds. I'm hearing and thinking it's perfect also for entrepreneurs and freelancers. I hadn't realized there was that dimension to it.
Sure,
great. So before I ask you, I just want to ask you because you mentioned some earlier on that about like how to make the best out of a video message and just using the tool. But before that, what's the name of your podcast?
I run 2 podcasts. One is called Bootstrapped Web. That's me and my friend Jordan, just behind the scenes talking about our businesses, what we're working on every week. We've been doing that one for many years. And then this year, I'm just starting up a new podcast right now. Probably by the time this comes out, that will be out. And that's called Open Threads. And so that one is more like this, like a conversations podcast where I talk to many different people, mostly other software entrepreneurs and founders, and a range of different topics. So.
Excellent. So for listeners, as if you didn't have enough podcasts to choose from, these two sound really, really good as well. So just to start wrapping up then, if I was thinking of starting to use more asynchronous video, and in particular, if I was going to work with Zip Message, what are some of the things I would want to be looking at? Some of the advice that you can give potential users?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it doesn't need to be a wholesale change overnight where all of your communication is going to move to async by tomorrow. It certainly does not have to be that, but I would start to just sort of be aware of all the situations where, is this live meeting really necessary? And usually that question comes up when someone asks you for the meeting or when someone sends you a calendar booking link. Maybe we can kick off this conversation asynchronously before we go. I like to have an async message back and forth before a meeting to sort of get a head start on that, or an async after a meeting to follow up and do a deep dive on all the points that we weren't able to talk about while we were on the call. So those are good, like sort of first opportunities to start using it. And then once you do that, then you start to see all these different potential use cases pop up every day.
And I'm starting to think as well, if you are a person who embraces the medium and who's also maybe likes experimenting a little bit, if you're invited to a meeting and you accept, you go, and then at the end of the meeting, you can say, great, let me show you something for the next time. Do you think we could? Because I think this is also looking for opportunities when we are seeing the potential of adapting new ways of communicating and working, to find the moments where we can meet people in their space. So we're meeting with them to do whatever we were doing. And there we can probably see, well, actually, if we'd done this piece asynchronously, then that would have helped us. So, hey,
that's a great
how
point.
about next time? Yeah, I think we need to start looking at exactly the moments where we've got them.
Yeah.
And where it's quite easy to just go and screen share or whatever. Yeah.
That's a really great point. I mean, this is something that I deal with every day with our customers on Zip Message. Is we do get a lot of feedback from. So our customers have adopted Zip Message, but they then need to have their customers and their clients adopt Zip Message with them. So I have heard some of that feedback where it's like, yeah, there's a little friction of getting the client to start to adopt it. And I like your suggestion of next time you're on a live call, maybe talk about, well, how about next time we try this asynchronous? That makes a lot of sense.
Make sure you add that time in the calendar with the person. Make sure you've given that buffer so that they don't rush off, because I'm noticing people just rush off. Yes, I think that's, I hadn't thought of that either. So yeah, good thinking, Brian. Now, of course, we've got zipmessage.com. Is that the URL to find out everything about the product?
Yep, that's the site.
And if people want to talk async with you, or if they just want to message you, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, sure. So like I said, my Zip Message link, it's zipmessage.com/Brian. I'm pretty active on Twitter. My Twitter handle is CastJam.
Great. I think listeners, if I were you and you were curious about this, go to Brian's page on Zip Message and send him a message, because they can try it out like that, can't they?
Absolutely. Yeah, I will see everyone and I'll try to reply.
A big thank you for listening to the 21st Century Work-Life podcast, produced by Virtual Not Distant. If you have something to add to the conversation, let us know through the contact form over at virtualnotdistant.com. I have been your host, Pilar Orti, and I'm signing off now. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, enjoy.